right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this conversation with tech icon Tim O'Reilly about building a better future. This is a series, a part of a series of events that Code for America is hosting as a lead up to our summit, which is our annual flagship event, which is really a coming together of the tech community and the government sector to talk about how we can change the community, change the ecosystem for the better. My name is Arlene Corbin-Lewis, and I'm the Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at Code for America. And at Code for America, we believe that government should be for the people, by the people in the digital age. Speaking of Summit, I would like to just mention that our annual event is coming up May 12th and May 13th. There is still an opportunity to join us at Summit, and I will share more about that at the end of this conversation. But I do want to invite you to be a part of Summit this year. If you enjoy this conversation, there will be many more like it, May 12th and 13th, and tickets are available at this point for $50. They go up tomorrow. So if you're excited about Summit, please be sure to purchase your ticket soon. One thing I will start by saying is just that we are talking about big ideas and kind of convening and coming together, and there is no better person to have that conversation with than Tim O'Reilly. Tim has been part of this ecosystem for quite some time. He has a history of convening conversations that reshape and have reshaped the computer industry. If you've heard the term open source software, if you've heard the term Web 2.0 or maker movement, government as a platform, the WTF economy, he's had a hand in framing those big ideas. He is the founder and CEO and chairman of O'Reilly Media and a partner at early stage venture firm O'Reilly Alpha Tech Ventures. He is a partner, or excuse me, he is also on the board of PeerJ, Civis Analytics, PopFox, and yes, Code for America. His book, WTF, What's the Future and Why? It's Up to Us, was released by HarperCollins in October of 2017. It is my distinct honor and privilege to be in conversation with Tim today. I will also mention that there is a code of conduct for this conversation. It will be in the chat. I've just stopped sharing my screen. All of our conversations, whether they're in person or virtual, do follow our code of conduct. So please be sure to take a look at that. But Tim, I just would like to welcome you and thank you for taking the time. And I'll just start by saying any opening words that you'd like to share with the audience.
Well, first off, I want to just thank you for having me. I love the work that Code for America does. I think it's really one of the most important organizations out there today trying to make the world a better place because it has a unique approach to how we get leverage. And it's recognizing the role that government plays in our economy and our society, as opposed to saying, well, let's reject it. Let's, pretend it doesn't matter or shouldn't matter. It says it does matter. It's a third of the economy. And therefore we must make it better. And not only must we make it better, we must make it better for everyone and not just for a few. But Code for America isn't just an advocacy organization. It's an organization that actually does things and teaches people how to do things better in government and with government, so that government, as you said earlier, can be by the people and for the people, in the 21st century with the tools of the digital age. And it's so powerful because, of course, if you can, create leverage and change a government program, you can sometimes have this incredible multiplicative effect. And, and it's not just in the realm of politics, it's in the realm of doing. And Code for America shows and leads by doing. And the programs that we have built are often transformative, not just because of the direct impact they have, but because they show what's possible. And then people look at it and go, oh, it could be like that.
Right.
And I think our vision of how, things could work, it becomes so much more powerful because we start to show it working.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
great.
that's what, and the summit is bringing together people who are doing the work.
That's
And yeah.
exactly right. Yeah, the summit is really a place where we've got people from the tech industry, from government, we have advocates. They are all coming together because they know things can be better. And so I just appreciate you taking the time today to have this kind of intro conversation about not just summit, but how you're seeing the world right now. There's so much opportunity that we're identifying at Code for America. I know that you've been talking about quite a bit. So I'm just really thrilled that we can have this conversation. I'm actually going to start us off just thinking about the opportunities that we're seeing right now. We're in the first 100 days of a new administration. We don't have to get all into the politics, but you've spoken quite a bit about the COVID-19 crisis, coupled with the change of the administration and how that presents an opportunity for reinvention of our economic systems, our digital infrastructure, and ultimately how we transition to a government as a platform. And so I do wonder, now that we're 100 days in, how you're thinking about where we're headed. Do you think we're heading in the right direction? And what are the problems that we should be focusing on? Are we focusing on the right problems? And so I'd love to start right there.
Well, I would just start out by saying we're not heading towards government as a platform. Government is a platform. It is infrastructure for society, and infrastructure can be good or it can be bad. We go, okay, yeah, we want to improve our roads. Okay, well, great. We want to improve our bridges, but there's way more infrastructure than that. Our social safety net is infrastructure, and if it's crumbling, we should fix that too. And so what I'm really the other thing that government as a platform does is it sets the rules. And the rules shape our economy and our society in ways that we don't entirely understand. And a good example, I think, is, and one that I think it's going to be very controversial, and may not pass, but the Biden administration's approach to capital gains taxes. We have an economy that has said, we have to optimize for capital, because that's where the dynamism of our economy comes from. And that might have been a good idea once, just like when Facebook started, it thought, well, we'll bring people together. But once we started seeing that they're driving people apart, we got to make some changes. And so we had this idea that we make our economy more efficient by, rewarding capital to incentivize innovation. And it got way, way, way out of hand, and now you have crazy valuations for companies that aren't doing anything yet. They're just sort of this vast casino. And that kind of structural change isn't just, oh, wow, we're going to tax the rich. And I think that's kind of the mistaken way to think about it. It's a way of saying, what do we value? And we're saying, no, actually, we have to actually value building services, for example. We have to fund services. We're suddenly talking about funding the caring economy at a higher level. And you go, oh, wow, yeah, capital, people are so awash in capital, they're throwing bets at crazy companies. Companies are using it for stock buybacks. They're saying, well, stock buybacks are because we have nothing to invest in. So why are we still incentivizing capital? Why aren't we saying, no, let's take some of what we've achieved there and put it towards new things? And that's a redesign in some ways of the operating system of our society. When we say, let's have a $15 minimum wage. I wish it was 22, but we're not there yet. I wish it was, but let's start figuring out how we have more support for children. Let's support, these are redirections and redesigns of the operating system of our society. Yeah. And, we haven't seen something this bold in 40 years. Now, people actually, kind of go back 80, 90 years to the New Deal. And I go, but we had something just as bold in the 80s where we basically said, we're going to stop doing all those things. We're going to start rewarding our companies. We're going to tell them, what's called the Friedman Doctrine after Milton Friedman. The only social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits. The idea that it would be trickle down. Mm-hmm. That was a revolution, and we're at a point where we're questioning that revolution. And the thing that's so important about this moment is we now have this meeting of policy ideas, that are progressive. But the real worry is that if they're not implemented well, everybody will say, "Oh, that didn't work."
Didn't work. Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, the work of Code for America is so important, because it's about how do we do the things that we say we want to do in our society, and
Yeah.
how do we do them well.
Yeah.
And I think, there's the line I remember in the movie about Facebook called The Social Network that I've always loved, where it's the Mark Zuckerberg character talking about the Winklevi twins, and
Mhm.
and he says, if they had built Facebook, they would have built Facebook. I.e., they had an idea, but they didn't actually build the thing that worked.
Yeah. Right.
And I built the thing that worked. And that's a really important idea, because we have all these arguments sometimes in our country about, well, the program should be this way or it should be that way. And we haven't actually interrogated enough. Well, did we actually do what we meant to do?
That's right.
And there's this incredible thing that's happening today because of technology, uh, which is that it's causing us to look at and question things that we just took for granted, that's just the way it is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's everything from, you go, and it's great because some of this is, it's like we're seeing all these bad things all of a sudden. We go, okay, well, we're gonna have a sentencing algorithm or a policing algorithm, and then we go, oh my God, look, it's incredibly racially biased.
Right.
And then we go, oh, the algorithm, the bad algorithm. I go, no. You don't say bad mirror when you look at yourself in the morning. You don't like what you see. You say, I gotta fix myself. And I think there's this incredible mirroring effect that we're seeing in technology, where it's showing us parts of ourselves and our society. And now it's time to get busy, making it better.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, there's as I think about the moment that we're in and the reflection that we're seeing of ourselves, it is actually this turning point where we're actually seeing like all of the ills of society that we've kind of rug swept for so long are actually coming to the fore. And so how do we actually reckon with that? This is kind of this moment of reckoning that we're all experiencing right now. And so as you think about the role of, you mentioned Milton Friedman and the trickle down economy, that has not necessarily worked, right? So
No, it has not
we've
worked at
seen
all.
that the numbers have shown that is not actually how this works. And so as you're thinking about people who are actually in the economy, people who are going to work day after day, what is their role? What can they do to kind of hold the people who are in leadership accountable? What can they say to them? What can they be pushing for? This is really a moment of revolution and evolution. And I'm seeing this in different ways, but I also get the sense that people feel in some ways powerless.
Yeah. The thing I would say about that is that there's so many different issues to focus on. And a lot of them are in the realm of politics, and I don't really want to go into one side or another of partisan issues. But I will say that change happens when people believe that things can be different. And changing the way people feel and think and believe about an issue is, in fact, almost the fundamental human act. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of fundamental human acts, loving people, kindness. But in terms of this contest of ideas, persuasion is fundamental to how we operate as a society. And I remember after I wrote my book, which had that subtitle, which actually was, I have to give credit where credit is due, was actually suggested to me by my wife, Jen Palka, the founder of Code for America. And she, I had some other subtitle, and she said, no, it should be Why It's Up to Us, because But then when I published the book, I remember being interviewed by Kara Swisher. And she said, who is this we you're talking about? And I said, look, it really is all of us. And think back, for example, to the American Revolution. You know, there were a set of people who suddenly didn't believe in kings anymore.
Mm.
And it was very contentious. You know, there were, you know, I don't know, it was 40% of the population were Tories. You know, they believe that we should still be, you know, and if I lived in Boston, you can go around Old Back Bay and you see these black bands still around the top of the chimneys. And that was how the Tories marked their homes, to say, we, you know, we're loyalists.
Mm.
And, you know, we forget that. We kind of think, oh, so everybody was on the same side. No, but there were a set of people who believed something different. And it was astonishingly, it seemed impossible, you know, and there's this great story, which I've actually, at first I thought, oh, it's got to be apocryphal, but apparently it isn't. When George III heard that George Washington had, you know, they won the war, they signed the peace treaty, and George Washington went back to his farm, George III said, if he has done that, he is the greatest man in the world, because they imagined that he was just going to be crowned king.
Yeah.
And I think that sense that we could believe something different, that we could believe in a, you know, and obviously you think about cases, you know, the civil rights movement, there's a set of people who believed something different and started making everyone else believe it too. And it's, you look at all the other fights for equity that are still going on today. It's about, you know, people saying, you know, we matter too, but, you know, and there needs to be space in our culture for who we are and how we are. And that act of persuasion comes from all over. And our kind of our, I mean, one of the things that for all that's still wrong in America, what's really good is we do have a strong current of multiculturalism that says there's room for multiple, you know, cultures, multiple points of view. It's not, you have to conform. And we have to preserve that. We have to preserve that sense that that's what creativity is about. You know, the periods, you know, this, in some ways you can look at American history as this sort of battle between conformity and creativity and exploration. And we celebrate it in the business realm, but we have to celebrate it in the cultural realm too. Absolutely. You know, we're reinventing ourselves. We're making the future. And so who is that us? It's all of us. And you never know, you know, who's going to come forward. And, you know, and it's, in some ways it's, you know, who would think, for example, that you'd have this, you know, these different faces, you know, someone like AOC, who was a waitress, and then you have, you know, Trump, who was a you know, big real estate developer, you know, kind of becoming these, you know, figures representing different visions of the future. And anyway, kind of let me bring it back. I just want to say that, you know, in politics, it often, you know, gets framed as zero sum, and there's an awful nasty strain in our politics where people aren't trying to find the right thing. But the good side is when people disagree and they have a theory about how the world could be better if you followed my idea. Mm-hmm. And what's really, I think, really difficult is when it just becomes name calling and nobody's actually doing the thing. Mm. And again, it kind of can come back to Code for America. Like, if we value certain things, we have to show each other how to make them work.
Right.
And that's what the work is.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask this question, Tim, because it's been so much a part of the conversation in the last few weeks. So there, you are a tech leader, a tech icon. People really look up to you in terms of how you've kind of evolved and helped change and shape the tech industry. And in recent weeks, we've had other tech leaders talk about removing politics and taking politics and political discussion out of the workplace. And so I do wonder, from your perspective, is there a role to have both a sense of let's make a difference and talk about these issues, these structural issues that are actually harming us or affecting us as a society, and also still be leaders in tech. And is there room for both? Because in some cases, there's an idea that there might not be room for both.
Well, I think that it's a really difficult issue, because I do think if our society were well functioning, we would expect and want there to be lots of room for disagreement.
Mm.
For people to argue in good faith and to still be friends.
Mm.
And we have politics has become really toxic lately, though, and so I could see why somebody would want to say we just can't keep, it's just chewing us up too much. I mean, I think about that in my own family, where I just go, I don't want to be part of this discussion with some of my family members. It's poisoning our relationship. And I could see that a company might want to say, hey, look, we just can't do that. At the same time, where do you draw the line? It's just a really hard problem, because if something really matters, you have to stand up. And the question is, when are you just, jawing on each other? And when are you talking about, like, how do we make something better? And I think, in some ways, we need a better language for how do we move forward than politics.
Yeah.
And we certainly need to have more room for people who are well-meaning with different beliefs, and figure out how do we distinguish between, people we disagree with and people who are in the old language of the internet, trolls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And still the same language of the internet, definitely still trolls out there.
Yeah.
No, that's a great.
I mean, don't feed the trolls was actually a really great one line that somebody said to me once many years ago, when I had gotten in an argument with a noted internet troll. It was never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. And you kind of go, so there is that. And yet there is also this incredible imperative to stand up and be counted.
Yeah. And
we have to figure out how to navigate that in our families, in our workplaces, in our society.
That's great. Thank you for that. Switching gears only slightly, I do wonder, if we're thinking about where we're going from here and the evolution that we see before us, what are the lessons that companies should be taking away from this moment, especially as we're looking ahead? There's the movement for racial justice. What are the things that people who are in leadership in tech and different types of companies should be taking from this year of civil unrest, the pandemic? There's so much that happened this year. And from my perspective, I would hope that we are taking some lessons away from it, so that it was not a moment in time that we did not learn from. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the biggest lesson that I would take away is it's possibly easier now for things to be different and better than it was before, because there's a whole lot of things that were sort of stuck and taken for granted that have now been really profoundly shaken up.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it's like a bunch of things that that were frozen are melted, and they can be refrozen into a new shape. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, seize the opportunity to do it differently, to say, oh wow, it doesn't have to be the way that it was. We don't have to go back. We can go forward. And that's on so many axes. You think about, for example, remote work, and you go, well, what opportunities are in remote work for more equity? It's so much easier, because there's a lot of people who couldn't participate, for example, in Silicon Valley because they weren't in the right place. Mm-hmm. And now maybe it's easier. So how do you do outreach and again, there were the incredible missed opportunities. I remember when Amazon was talking about HQ2, I thought, God, if Amazon really wants to be a company that, stands out and makes a difference, they should be finding a place that's not already full of tech people. They should go to a place where they will make it better. I remember I once I was working on our property in Sebastopol where I used to live, and had this landscape architect who came in to help us, and she said, "Oh, everybody always wants to put their nice new thing where it's already beautiful." She said, "No, you want to put your nice new thing in the worst part of your property, so you will make it better." And I thought that was really good advice. It's like, and I remember also Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist, kind of talking about that was the founding myth of Western society. In the the Knights of the Round Table, you go into the deepest, darkest part of the forest looking for a problem to fix. And of course, again, kind of keeps bringing back to Code for America. We think about some of the things that we've gone in, and we go, right now, there's certain government programs are the deepest, darkest part of the forest.
Yeah, that's a great point. Earlier I mentioned Summit, and this year's theme for our annual Summit is designing an equitable government together. And, it is about unearthing some of our biggest problems. Like, what are the things that we're really tackling as a society that we need to fix, help transform? And so curious to hear from you what that means when you hear designing an equitable government together.
Well, I think that there's so many axes, and I don't know that I have any kind of general prescription, because part of the wonder of tackling something as large as a nation of hundreds of millions of people is that there are hundreds of millions of issues, starting locally,
Right.
And all the way up to the national level. And we do think an awful lot about national politics to the exclusion of local. And, whereas you think about how many things that really need to be solved are local, and maybe they may be funded in part by federal government. But, you look at building codes, for example, which restrict housing density. Okay, well, there are reasons why we don't have enough housing, why we have a homelessness problem, why rents are so high. And we have to understand that there are people who want it that way because they want rents to be high. And in some ways, the job of government and the job of an economy is to set rules and expectations about who gets what and why. And if you built a set of rules and you discover that some people are getting too much from the way the rules are set, you fix that. And one I think about a lot on housing. I actually had this kind of idea. It's nowhere near enough, but I was sort of thinking about the way that the mortgage interest credit, which is this huge, benefit to the middle class, and people love it, and it's really important, and it's been a great source of wealth building for a set of people. And we know that there's another set of people who were historically excluded from that. And so that program grew and grew and grew till it's covering second homes and even yachts. Meanwhile, there's still the original purpose has been lost. And I go, wow, what if we said we're going to, again, using a term from technology, we're going to refactor this tax operating system that shapes our housing market. And we're going to say, oh, we want to go back to this idea of creating an entry point into this source of wealth building for people who didn't have it. And we realized we made it too rich for the people who are already in the system. And we're going to shift that. That would be this incredible, first of all, a recognition that, when we talk about the market, we kind of act like it's like the law of gravity, and instead of realizing it's something we built. And that's actually a lot of what my current work is about, is like trying to explain to people, that you can look at the way that Facebook works or Google or Amazon, and you see that it's this vast algorithmic thing that affects, billions of people and organizes them into a market. But you don't lose sight of the fact that somebody built it and somebody runs it and somebody manages the way that works. And yet when it comes to our broader society, we sort of pretend that the way it works is somehow inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as opposed to something that we can perfect, that we can
Right.
get better at, that we can go, oh, it didn't do this thing. It needs to do that thing. You know, climate change, a great example of that, you know, and you do see that the rules gradually start changing, and the market, as all these independent actors also start changing it. But, you know, I don't know that we'd be where we are with electric vehicles, for example, if the government had not made a $500 million loan to Tesla. You know, that was a government intervention. And I think in a similar way, you know, if we want to actually, you know, solve our, you know, you know, some of the racial inequities, we need government intervention. And, you know, that's in everything from policing to, you know, things like how would we actually start to sort of build generational wealth in the, you know, in the ways that it was done for, you know, the middle class. Of course, we also have to tackle the fact that the system we built has gotten so top heavy that even the original, you know, beneficiaries in the white middle class haven't been doing very well, you know. So we kind of go, wow, this whole thing is out of whack. We got
Mm-hmm.
to re-engineer the system we built. You know, and I keep thinking like, gosh, if we can, you know, again, this idea of technology as a mirror, if we can see it and go, oh, Facebook has to fix this problem. Can we see that we have built a thing? You know, and I think when people think about government, they don't really think about what is it.
Yeah.
And first of all, it's a set of rules. And another word for rules is algorithms, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and then there's a set of mechanisms by which those algorithms are applied. And sometimes you have actually a good algorithm badly applied, you know, where it doesn't actually do what, and sometimes you have a bad algorithm well applied, and that's can be even worse, right?
Yeah.
And so we actually have to fix both the fundamental ideas about what is equity, what is justice, what is the society that we want to build,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, who should we be benefiting, what's it for, and you know, and I think that if there's this fundamental idea that if it isn't equitable, it's broken. It's not just like the inequity is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, you know, there's nothing we can do about it, or we can just palliate it a little bit. We could say, no, our objective is to build a system of government that creates opportunity for everyone. And when we have identified areas where that is not true or where that's unequal, we want to fix it. How do we fix it? Let's go in and let's get to the details. Let's talk to the people. And, you know, again, it's so in the work that Code for America does, so much of it is a process of discovery. It's like
Mm-hmm.
talking to the people who are affected, or listening, not talking to them, listening to the people who are affected, and going, oh, it's like, it was like that. Oh,
Right.
we thought we had to fix this thing, but no, it was really like that.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic answer to that question, Tim. And thank you for kind of explaining it and breaking it down. You're absolutely right. It is so much about making sure that we're listening to the right people and the people who are most affected by the issues that we're trying to tackle. I actually want to open things up to the people who are listening right now and see if they have any questions. If folks have questions for Tim, you are invited to ask them through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Definitely want to hear what you want to ask of Tim. So I'm going to open it up to questions, but while we wait for questions to come in, Tim, you've mentioned Code for America quite a bit. And so I'm curious about what it was about the idea of Code for America in the early days that led you to become an early investor in Code for America and has kind of kept you connected to Code for America after all these years as a board member, a longstanding board member at that.
Well, I mean, I guess it's sort of hard to say because in some ways, what became Code for America, I was working on with Jen before she started. We had, you know, created a conference called the Gov 2.0 Summit, which was really about this idea of bringing together technologists and people in government. We, you know, Jen and I were working together on, you know, we worked on the Web 2.0 Expo and so when we did the Gov 2.0 thing, we were talking to a lot of people, and Anish Chopra, who was President Obama's first CTO, said, "I hope this can be more than a conference."
Mm.
And he planted that idea in Jen's head. And after the first year of doing the event, she quit. She had this crazy idea to start Code for America, and she, called me up. We were talking, and she was asking me for advice, and she said, "Would you become a board member?" And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, she quit her job. She's a single mom. She's trying to make this thing happen. Oh my God, I got to help her. And so it was a very personal connection, quite honestly. Well, I mean, it was a personal connection that was rooted in this shared idea that, that if we didn't bring government into the 20th century, 21st century, it was, then we had a deep problem. But then really just watching the thing unfold, it's just been this incredible learning journey, and it keeps me engaged because, there's so much to learn, and we're learning more and having a bigger impact, and that's really fabulous.
I love that. I love that answer, Tim, and glad to have you continuing to be a part of Code for America. Yeah. I do have some questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to start with a question from Benjamin, who says, "We heard many high-level abstractions on how to improve our society using technology. Do you have any specific recommendations for building a code or a scientific computing infrastructure? And what are the places within government where data analysts, scientists, engineers, etc., can have the greatest impact? Furthermore, how do we convince society that we should be investing in these tech or computing sectors to improve the basic functioning of government?"
Yeah, I guess I would say the first thing that we really need to get across is that technological capability should not be outsourced. We really have we've been in the grip of a theory of government that says this tech stuff is just something you should just buy from the outside. And while I think it's really true that there's a lot of value in, government shouldn't necessarily be building up this huge capacity and competing with the private sector, it should have the capability to understand and engage with and manage projects. When Jen took a year off and was at the White House, she actually had an experience with someone who was the CIO of a government agency who could not figure out how to use an iPad. I mean, that's pretty seriously out of touch with technology. And now at the federal level, you have the United States Digital Service, you have 18F, you have the Defense Digital Service, where you really have these groups that are bringing that capability to come in and say, meet with a project, say, no, this contract just doesn't make sense, or here's how we can go about solving this problem. And so building the muscle inside government. And I think at the local level, this digital services all through. And I think the biggest challenge we have is giving them more authority. There's so many good people in government who are hamstrung. And one of the things I think that's sort of powerful with Code for America, it's the inside-outside play, because sometimes we can find someone working in government who, has the right idea, but they don't know how to, they can't, because of the way contracting works, they can't do the thing that they know, and we can do it. So when you think about our work with Get CalFresh, it was really, working with the city of San Francisco, who knew they had a problem, that their participation rate was really low. And, we had a process where bottom up from the outside, we could figure out what was wrong. We could build what in tech we call an MVP for how to fix it. Whereas in the traditional way that government's been hamstrung, they would have had to already know the solution and put out a requirements documentation and had a, multi-year procurement, which would mean that, of course, by the time it was actually awarded, it would be 5 years out of date, whatever they were building. And we were able to show this is how you do it, and get to a point where they go, oh, okay, yeah, now we know. Now we can start to build. We know what we can build towards. And so I think there's this inside outside play. So, but the other thing I would say, Benjamin, you talk about data analysts, scientists, and engineers, and maybe that's because you are one of those people. And I think there are many areas for that, but I think we're also really in need of people with user experience shops. Because so much of the work that needs to be done is understanding users and the issues that they have.
Right. Thank you. A question from Zavita. What do you think are immediate or low-hanging steps that our local or state governments can take when trying to improve equitable outcomes?
Oh, where to begin?
And Savita did note that this is a broad question. So.
Yeah. Well, boy, that's kind of like, well, what are the biggest problems? It depends where you are. I know certainly in, in the Bay Area, people, struggle a lot with, the rise of homelessness and how we fix that. And so there's a part of me thinks that, figuring out, I mean, again, we have to go understand, well, why are people homeless? And, part of it, there's a lot of, work, there's different homeless populations, and some of them need, just give them housing, in other cases, though, it's like, wow, we have a system where people are just not making enough money, and our rents are too high. And you go, that's not something you're gonna solve with some kind of homeless aid problem. It's something you're gonna, it's like working on improving the minimum wage, improving, lowering the cost of housing, and not through, again, this interplay between understanding the operating, this operating system analogy is not perfect, but it, like going, zoning is part of the operating system of our city. And if the zoning says you can't have multifamily units, that's going to basically make them hard to have, right? So zoning reform, is again, I'm kind of going a little bit more towards policy there, but I do think that ultimately, there's a hierarchy of things that we need to work on, to look at criminal justice reform and the work we're doing with Clear My Record. It's like figuring out, oh, here was this broken process by which people could clear their records after they had done their time, so they could, get jobs. So, and we figured out a way how to make that much faster. But the bigger, deeper solution is don't criminalize so many things. Don't apply the law unequally to some groups rather than others. I mean, and then so the range from implementation through policy, we got to work on all those fronts, and there's room for so many people, to pick your place to try to make a difference.
Thanks for that. It's a lot of questions coming in. I'll go to the next one, which is, for any big change, you need to have regular wins on the road to big wins or big goals. At the same time, if you have too many goals, you may not achieve any goals. What do you think should be the top 2 to 3 priorities for Code for America? And what will regular wins be along the way?
Well, I think we've shown some really powerful things with regard to increasing access to the safety net. And, the work that we started with Get CalFresh, and we're now doing with integrated benefits, working in a bunch of states. You look at it, we started local, we went to the full state, and there's a lot of other states. Um, but also identifying, it's really interesting, our work on the earned income tax credit, um, really began actually through research, just user research into job training, believe it or not. It was like, we're kind of looking at how do we improve the job training system, and we realized that it was very hard to fix, because a lot of reasons I don't need to go into, but that the biggest thing that would make people able to take the time to look for jobs and so on is more money. Oh, here's this pot of more money that people aren't, you know, um, you know, don't even realize that they can get. How do we make it easier for people to get their refund, from EITC? Know that there's actual, a cash benefit that you can get. And it's funny, it was simply by talking to enough people and listening enough, you start to go, oh, here's a point of leverage. So I guess what I would say is, whatever your problem that you're trying to solve, go in and do enough user research, and the market will start to talk to you about what is the point of leverage.
Mhm. Great. I'm going to ask this next question, which I think is an interesting one. What do you think are the roles of tech and technologists in the fight against misinformation?
Well, I think there are pretty clearly important technological fixes, that are available. I think the ability of technology platforms to identify misinformation are actually, again, they're far from perfect. It's a difficult battle, but it's not that dissimilar in a lot of ways from the battle against, internet spam or credit card fraud, or, these are things that you can make a lot of progress with, the help of our, algorithmic genies, that kind of can help us.
Mm.
What we really need is the will to do it. And I think that that will is often sadly lacking, because so many of these things have become polarized, and one person says this isn't misinformation, this is free speech.
Mm.
And I guess I believe that it takes some guts on the part of tech leadership to say, I'm sorry, this is what I believe. And it's like when a company like Twitter or Facebook takes a stand, we're all better off.
Mm.
And it's funny, because there's kind of a delegitimization of taking a stand when it comes to these platforms. And I go, nobody's telling Rupert Murdoch, oh, you have to fix what you do. It seems perfectly legitimate for the Fox, empire to be biased and to have its objectives. And yet, if Mark Zuckerberg were to say, well, this is what I believe, and that's certainly been my advice to Mark, I said, look, stop trying to pretend that somehow you're going to get all of the values. Either government has to pass a law, or, what do you believe in? And if you really believe that you want to bring people together, you're going to have to take a stand. Like, does this, and I think it really hits back to this idea of our overall financial operating system. And that's one of the things that it's the part of my work that's furthest from Code for America in one sense.
Mm.
It's just this understanding that we have a set of financial algorithms that shape our market. And the most pernicious of them is this idea that increasing corporate profits is a requirement. And the way that it's sort of like you can see a company as a kind of machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about this. There's a statement I had, probably the thing that I've said over the years that's been quoted most often is, I once said years ago, money in a business is like gas in a car. You go on a road trip and you're not taking a tour of gas stations. You don't want to run out. But there's a thing that occurred to me lately, which is But if you take a road trip in an SUV, you need more gas than if you have an energy efficient vehicle, right? So how do we build a more energy efficient vehicle so you don't need as much gas? Because this really shapes, like if you look at the machine that is Facebook, for example, you go, oh, they're making all this money. But there's parts of the machine where they need that money. And it's not because Mark Zuckerberg needs some more billions on his bank account. It's because they pay their engineers with stock, with rights to stock appreciation, whether it's options or various other forms. And that stock has to keep going up. That's like putting the gas in the car. And they built this enormous SUV, that needs that price to keep going up. It's why Apple has to have, suicide level wages in China, so they can give $90 billion in stock buybacks. No, but it's because their stock has to keep going up because it's part of the currency. And I go, one of the things I would say if these companies could do that would most change would be to say, oh, we're actually going to try to decouple ourselves from that master algorithm of our society and to say enough. There's an old book I read recently by a guy named Yorgos Kallis, and it's called Limits. The subtitle is Why Malthus Was Wrong and Why Environmentalists Should Care. And of course, everybody, thinks of Malthus with this cartoonish version. Here's this guy who said, population would outrun food production. And he said that's really not the point, because we know Malthus was wrong. I mean, he has some points about actually Malthus thought that the poor should be kept poor because that would make them work harder. But the real thing that we should take away from that was that as people became wealthier, they had fewer children. Thought it was the desire for more children, which is why population would continue to outstrip. And he said, okay, so take that principle and realize that people can want something different. And so people didn't need children to work the farm anymore, and they started making different choices. And again, he's making the point, like, we have in the rich countries, we have met our needs for a whole set of people, right? So we need to start making different choices. And yes, there's enough to go around, but not if we have this idea that the people who have a lot must always get more. And I think in some sense, building companies that don't always require growth at that level, they're not, they're not gas guzzling machines, so to speak, is a real step. We have to build an economy that's centered more on people, as opposed to like, we just have to make the machine bigger and bigger.
Right. Yeah. We have just a few minutes left. I'm going to ask one more question from the Q&A, and then we'll have to close things off. But there is a question here from Christine about that touches on infrastructure, which you mentioned earlier on, Tim, and it is, if local government IT infrastructure are decades old, should the focus be on building a strong internal backbone before focusing on building digital services for the public?
No. I think you don't know what backbone you need until you know what services you're going to try to build. And there's a lot of the backbone, when you talk about what can be outsourced, a lot of the backbone can be outsourced, particularly in this era of cloud. What can't be outsourced is that interface to the public and that interface to the policymakers who are making decisions about what to do. And so I think if you understand what it is that you're going to do, then you work backwards to the infrastructure. And of course, this is the way that tech companies work. It's the whole idea of the lean startup and the minimum viable product. Eric Ries's idea, by the way, Eric was once for a while a Code for America board member too. That you can just fake it on the, like in the beginning, infrastructure wise, he has this thing he calls concierge minimum viable product, which is like literally you pretend it's automated and you do it with people for a small number of people until you figure out what works. And then you build it and you work backwards to the infrastructure. Can I jump in with one more, which is Barbara Havens? She said to avoid fraud, better identity management for the best recipients of government funds and services seems an issue for government.
Right.
What cultural barriers will it have to overcome? I think the issue of fraud is a difficult one. You know, because there is real fraud, but often the mechanisms that government uses to detect fraud are targeted wrong in the same way that we see in so many other areas. You know, Jen was co-chair of a commission to look at pandemic unemployment insurance here in California over the summer and last summer, and it was really interesting because the fraudsters actually know how to fill out all the paperwork correctly, right? They've automated it at scale, right? And we had all these checks that were designed, you know, to catch individuals who didn't know what they were doing. You know, so we raised the barrier for legitimate people because we were trying to deal with fraud. And, you know, it didn't really affect the real fraud. So again, it's this process of, you know, getting in there and really understanding the problem. So I think that, you know, I think that that's really, really important. Anyway, there's so many more interesting questions here. And maybe I'll see if I can try to answer some of them offline later, but thanks so much.
Thank you for that, Tim. This has actually been a fantastic conversation. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your insights with us today, and really appreciate you taking the time for being such a champion for change and for a better future. Thank you to everyone who's joined us as well for asking these questions. I wish we had more time with Tim. Just a reminder to everyone watching that there is still time to hear more conversations like this one at Code for America Summit, which is taking place May 12th and 13th. If you're interested in joining us, tickets are $50 before the end of the day tomorrow. They go up after tomorrow at the end of April. And you can learn more about this exciting virtual event at summit.codeforamerica.org. Thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you at Summit. And thank you, Tim, so much for your time.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's really fun talking with you, Arlene.
Great. It's my pleasure.